So when you hear the letters LSD, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably the 60s, right? Tie-dye, counterculture, all that stuff. But that's not where the story of LSD actually began. No, it started in a quiet lab in Switzerland with a very careful, methodical chemist named Albert Hofmann. Today we're going to pull back the curtain on his most famous and, as you'll see, his most troublesome creation.
Right from the horse's mouth, Hofmann saw this incredible duality in his discovery. He called it a problem child, but he never lost sight of its potential to become a wonder child. And really, this conflict, it defined his entire relationship with the substance. He saw what it could do for good, but he was absolutely horrified by the way it was being misused.
So, that's the big question, isn't it? How did a guy like this end up creating something that would change the world? Well, the story is way more deliberate and honestly a lot stranger than most people think. It's a tale of careful, systematic research that gets completely upended by one single moment of pure, world-altering chance.
To really get LSD, we have to first understand what Hofmann was even trying to do. And let me tell you, he was not trying to invent a psychedelic drug. Not even close. He was part of a very serious research program at Sandoz Laboratories, trying to cook up useful medicines from a very unlikely source.
Yeah, that source was a fungus called ergot, and this stuff has a seriously dark history. For centuries, if this fungus got into the grain supply, it would cause these horrific mass poisonings they called St. Anthony's fire. People who ate contaminated bread would suffer from gangrene, terrifying convulsions, and madness. But Hofmann and his team at Sandoz had a hunch that hidden inside this deadly poison were the keys to some powerful new medicines.
So Hofmann gets to work, and it's slow, painstaking stuff. By 1938, he's deep into it, and he synthesizes the 25th substance in a series of compounds he's working on. He calls it lysergic acid diethylamide 25, or, you guessed it, LSD 25. They tested it to see if it could help with blood circulation, but the results were, meh. The lab animals just got a little antsy, so they labeled it uninteresting and put it on the shelf. And for 5 whole years, that was it. Story over.
Or was it? 5 years later, that forgotten little compound was about to make the most dramatic comeback you can imagine. This is where the story gets really wild, and it all leads to an event that psychedelic history now calls Bicycle Day. So it's April 16, 1943. Hofmann gets what he later called a peculiar presentiment, basically a weird gut feeling, an itch he couldn't scratch, telling him there was something more to this LSD 25 compound they'd missed. He decides to make another batch. And while he's working, he suddenly feels incredibly dizzy and restless. He feels so strange he has to stop work and go home.
And when he gets home, he lies down, and this is what he experiences. He realizes he must have accidentally absorbed a tiny, tiny trace of the chemical, probably through his fingertips. Now, the only way to prove it was to do a proper experiment. On himself. A decision that tells you everything you need to know about his scientific dedication.
So 3 days later, on April 19th, he does it. He intentionally doses himself with what he assumes is an absurdly small amount, 250 micrograms, that's 0.25 milligrams. He figured that if it did anything at all, it would be the absolute bare minimum, just barely perceptible. He had no clue he was about to take what we now know is a very, very strong dose. And oh, he felt it. The effects hit him hard during his bike ride home, the ride that made Bicycle Day famous. His entire reality just shattered. The world around him started to warp and distort. He felt like a demon had literally taken over his body. He was consumed by this terrifying fear that he was either dying or losing his mind for good.
But then, the next morning, he wakes up and the terror is just gone. And in its place is this incredible feeling of well-being, of renewal. He walked out into his garden and saw the world sparkling with life like it had just been created. He had gone through hell, but he had come out the other side and seen a kind of heaven.
Okay, so back at Sandoz, they quickly realized they had something extraordinary on their hands. It wasn't a circulatory drug, that was for sure, but it was clearly one of the most powerful psychoactive substances ever discovered. They started cautiously sending it out to researchers, giving it the trade name Dilicide.
And at first, the psychiatric community was fascinated. They saw it as this revolutionary tool. It wasn't a cure in a pill, but it was like a chemical key that could unlock a patient's mind, helping them access repressed memories or break out of rigid, negative ways of thinking. Some psychiatrists even took it themselves, believing it would help them better understand what their patients were going through.
But you know how these things go.
This controlled, careful, clinical use was not going to last. By the 1960s, LSD had escaped the lab and just exploded into pop culture. It went from a potential medicine to a full-blown phenomenon. And this is the moment Hoffman's creation truly became his problem child.
You basically had two completely different visions at war with each other. On one side, you have Albert Hoffman, the cautious scientist, saying, hey, this is a powerful tool for exploring the mind, but it has to be used carefully, under supervision. And on the other side, you have figures like Timothy Leary, essentially calling it a holy sacrament and telling an entire generation to turn on, tune in, drop out. These two ideas just couldn't coexist.
And Hoffman was quick to point out that all the scary stories, the horror trips, were a direct result of this reckless, freewheeling approach. The LSD experience is massively influenced by your mindset and your environment. So when people started taking it in uncontrolled settings with sketchy doses from the black market, or when they were already in a bad mental state, well, the risk of panic, psychosis, and serious psychological harm went through the roof. Eventually, the cultural storm just got too big. The media was in a frenzy full of sensationalist stories about bad trips. And so, faced with what they called an LSD hysteria, Sandoz, the very company that created it, made a shocking decision. In 1965, they stopped all production and distribution. They completely washed their hands of their problem child.
So after Sandoz pulled the plug, LSD became a scientific outcast for decades. Research ground to a halt. But Hoffman himself, he never lost faith. He spent the rest of his long life arguing that his discovery still had incredible potential, if only people could learn to understand and respect it.
And this quote from him just nails his final perspective. He believed the great tragedy of LSD was that everyone got it wrong. It was mistaken for a simple party drug, a way to get high, when in his eyes it was something so much deeper, so much more powerful, a tool that demanded the absolute utmost respect.
Which kind of leaves us with a question for today, doesn't it? After decades of being this cultural taboo, psychedelic research is making a huge comeback. Scientists are once again looking at LSD and other compounds to treat things like depression, PTSD, and addiction. So you have to wonder, after its chaotic, difficult life as a problem child, is it possible that Hoffman's discovery is finally on the path to becoming the wonder child he always knew it could be?